that you're here worshiping with us on this day. If this is your first time here, a special welcome to you. We're delighted that you've joined us on this Sunday. Most of you know the drill. There is coffee, flavored coffee, tea, there's refreshments back there. So do that whole eat, drink before, during, and after worship thing. And join us. We thank the Whelans and Janelle for bringing our food for us. So keep eating. They want you to eat and be happy. And somewhere on your table there's a sign-in sheet. So if you would sign in and let us know that you're here. If you are a newcomer, if you would add your contact information. That way we'll know just a little bit more about you and where you're from and all of that other good stuff. So this is, according to the calendar, this is a fifth Sunday. So those of you who have been affiliated with Journey for a while know that anytime a fifth Sunday pops up, we do something special. And as luck would have it, I just love it when things come together, because about halfway through the month I realized, oh no, I didn't plan for a fifth Sunday. And then I left for Arizona, and I went, oh, we got a fifth Sunday right here in the van with me. So today you're going to be hearing a little bit from our service team that went to Arizona and worked on both sides of the border. You may remember last year we did a series on putting the act in social action. And we spent, I think it was the first Sunday in May that the United Church of Christ had designated as Immigration Reform Sunday or Immigration Rights Sunday. So we talked a little bit at that point about some scripture passages and the implications for all of us. So in some ways it was kind of natural that this trip flowed out of that. About a year later now, we're kind of giving you an update on that, a first person point of view. And it comes to us in the version of sharing our stories. You guys know also, if you've been around Journey for a while, that every once in a while we have somebody come up and share their story and talk about some experience they've had in their life that has a direct correlation to what we're talking about. So today you'll hear from people who were on that trip with us. You'll hear their first-person stories. You'll see some of our pictures and hopefully get a chance just to get a little glimpse into what we did. If we told you everything that we did in the entire week we were gone, we would be here for 3 days. So understand you're just going to get little snippets. And hopefully if you want to know more, just really, we're here to answer questions for you. So if you have things that you want to know more about, we are happy and delighted to tell you more. So we're going to start, obviously our order of worship is a little mixed up today. We like to change it up and be unpredictable. And you can stay standing and join me in our call to worship. Your part will appear in yellow. We gather to worship together.
Different people, different lives, different histories.
Yet all children of the same parent.
Created lovingly by the source of all life.
We gather to reconnect with one another.
Different people, different lives, different histories.
Yet all disciples of one teacher.
Jesus, the Word made flesh, dwelling among us.
We gather with different joys and sorrows, different hopes and fears.
Different people, different lives, different mysteries.
Yet one people with one God, one faith, one baptism.
Let us open ourselves to the presence of God at work in us, among us, and through us.
And before we get some stories going here, I want to set the context, because every story has a context, a setting, and a background. And so it'll be helpful for you to know a little bit about what the situation is on the Arizona-Mexico border and how we got to that place. So I'm going to start with statistics. So those of you who like numbers, here's your chance. Woohoo! Since 1994, more than 6,000 people have died while trying to cross the border between Mexico and the U.S. 6,000 people have lost their lives. Now, if you do math, those of you who are math people, and you figure that out per year, it amounts to what would be a small or a medium-sized plane crashing every year. And if you think about the media attention that a plane crash gets in our society, it's pretty amazing, right? Yet this happens every year on the Arizona-Mexico border, and most of us, for the most part, have heard nothing about it. So another statistic, since 2009, nearly 400,000 people have been deported every year. 400,000 every year. And they get deported, and oftentimes what happens is that results in divided families. Because it's not like a whole family gets deported, and they get broken up, and we'll talk a little bit about how that happens. So one of the questions I know maybe lingering kind of in your mind is like, so if this is happening, if people are dying and people are being deported, why do people keep coming to this country illegally? Why don't they just get like nice little paperwork and visas and come here the legal way, right? And put an end to all the death and dying and suffering. The fact is that most immigrants who attempt to come into this country have little or no chance of actually obtaining a visa. If you have any understanding of what's required to get a visa, you'll know that it's a very expensive process. You have to have resources. You have to prove that you have resources in order to enter this country, because in the United States, we don't want just anybody. We want people who can bring with them some things. We don't, despite that Statue of Liberty and the saying, give me your poor and your needy. Yeah, we don't really mean that anymore. We only want people who have the resources to get a visa the legal way, which is oftentimes very expensive and also time-consuming. In the U.S., to enter the U.S. legally could result in a wait of up to 20 years. So, how did we get this way? How did this get to be what it is? I want to give you a little history that I think will set the stage. How many of you know about NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement? Okay. It goes back to 1994 when NAFTA was approved. And what happened is it set up so that we could exchange grain and all of these crops here in North America. I don't know how much of you guys know, how much you know about like grain production like in the Midwest where I grew up. But I know in the Midwest a lot of our crops, first of all, we have huge farms, so it makes the crop a little bit cheaper, whatever's produced. And then we also have a pretty substantial amount of subsidies on our crops, whatever we produce in this country. Farmers in the Midwest kind of get a little money to underwrite their costs. So what happened is our grain became very, very cheap, particularly our corn. And so we sent it to Mexico because it was cheaper. But think about what Mexico does. Mexico is a pretty agricultural kind of country. And so in essence what we did was we put all of these small and medium-sized farms in Mexico out of business because our grain was going into the country and people could buy it much more cheaply than they could buy the local grain. So in essence, we just kind of put everybody under. And so people wanted to come here to, get jobs, get money, work on our big mega farms that were producing the corn that was going back to their own country. Then you have to remember that what happened a little bit later is that the United States started to seal our borders. Back in the day, there used to be a fairly good circular motion about immigrants. They would come and do our crops, and then they would take their money and go back to their families, and that's how they lived. It was kind of like come to the country, make the rounds, go back to your country, and things like that, they flowed like that. But all of a sudden, the United States decided we want to kind of close our borders. And so this isn't a particularly good view of the fence, but what we did is we built a fence like this all across our southern border, which cost billions of dollars, first of all. And it's such a beautiful work of art, not. But that's what we did. We spent a lot of money. So all of a sudden now there's this fence. And the places where people used to cross fairly easily, pretty much in urban areas like El Paso and Nogales where we were, they became even more strict. So there was no way people were crossing there. They couldn't cross easily where the fence was. So what happened is people were all of a sudden channeled into the desert. The people in charge of all of this, Homeland Security, decided that would be, or they thought, that would be a natural deterrent for people. Like, who's crazy enough to go into the desert and try to get into this country through this hot place where people cannot survive more than a few days without water? Well, who's crazy enough to do that? Any of you who are parents will understand who's crazy enough to do that. If your child is starving and your child cries every day because they're hungry, and you are not able to support your child and take care of their basic needs, are you going to go try to get through the desert? Heck yeah, right? That's who's coming across the desert, are people who want just to provide for their families. And what happened with this big wall, it not only made it more difficult to come into our country, it also divided families. Because remember, there was this circular motion, and occasionally as people came, they stayed here, part of the family, and part of the family would be back. But now you have mom over here with maybe a couple kids, dad's back in Mexico, or vice versa. And so literally families are divided by this wall, and they can't get back and forth to see each other anymore with any great ease. So those of you who have extended family who you like and enjoy visiting, you'll see a little incentive about why people cross the border. So that sets a little bit of the context about what led to what you're going to hear about today. I just also want to let you know that our host for the week was this incredibly funky, I want to grow up and be like Good Shepherd United Church of Christ. I think as Pastor Randy was giving us our introduction and talking about how the ways that they do things, all of us were smiling and nodding, going, yes, that's sturdy in another 20 years maybe, or maybe even 10. But how they function is very similar to the way we function in terms of, let's just do this. Anybody got an idea? Let's go with it. And they are very involved in hands-on service and making a difference in their communities. So that's where we stayed. As we worked, we stayed on their floor on little air mattresses and stuff. We also worked with an organization called the Samaritans, who do water drops and desert searches, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. We heard from an organization called Calibri, and you'll see a little video about that. And then one day we did go across the border into Mexico and worked with a Jesuit mission called El Comador, and you'll hear about that as well. So our first story is going to come from Marcy. She's going to tell you about the day we went out into the desert and did a desert walk and experienced what desert walking and trailblazing is like.
What's your immigration story? Where did your family come from, and why did they leave home? My family came in the last 2 generations, both sides from the British Isles, both for economic reasons, not real hardship. They just wanted a chance to do a little bit better. No persecution, chance to start over. Tom's family came 200 years ago, and they were persecuted. French Huguenots were chased all over Europe before they ended here. Each person who crosses that desert comes for a different reason, but the overarching themes, like Sandy talked about, were violence and economic hardship. Real brutal violence in the wars in Central America and the cartels who seem to control most of the area. Extreme unthinkable violence, economic loss of income for small farmers in rural areas, and triple-digit inflation in urban prices, families unable to feed their children. So an older son, a father, or a young couple leave and make their way to the U.S. border in the hopes of finding a living, either to live in conditions we would find unacceptable so they can send money back home, or to forge a new life for themselves away from the past. Their journey, what's it like? They bring no trunks with them, as our people did. They book no passage, steerage or second class, as there are no legitimate commercial travel companies making this journey. They carry everything in a backpack or a purse. And when they reach the border, the official gate is not open for them. They're forbidden entry, so they pay a coyote to guide them across the border in a less populated area. Coyotes are mostly run by the cartels, and they may or may not actually guide you to safety. They may just take your money and leave you, either in Mexico, on the wrong side of the border, or in the desert, trapped in a truck, or abandoned in the wilderness. Why the desert? It's a part of the border that was thought to be uncrossable due to the terrain and climate, but these are desperate people willing to do whatever it takes to get to the United States. Some of them are from mountainous areas like Guatemala, El Salvador. They have no understanding of the desert. So if you were going to go on this journey, what would you bring? What did your ancestors bring? Papers to prove they had a right to enter? Identification to show who they were, where they were from? Photos of family members? Items needed for a new life? Medicine, seeds, tools, food? Family heirlooms? Jewelry, Bible, teapot, musical instruments, clothing? When my 11-year-old mother emigrated, she brought an elocution medal she had won for public speaking. And I never thought of it until all of this and realized that she carried that. These immigrants carry no identification and only what will fit in a backpack or purse. They've carried it for hundreds of miles on their backs to end up in a desert with no access to water, little snakes, little shade, big rattlesnakes, scorpions, and at least 30 miles to cover on foot, hiking at night to avoid capture, tripping over rocks, spiny cactus, steep arroyos. We looked at that desert. Shura was a leader of the Samaritans who provide humanitarian relief to the refugees. We went to Shura's home to set out on a walk that she guided us through the desert. Our first surprise was that it was only 1.5 blocks from her home. You could see this from her driveway. Just inside the gate to the desert, Shura warned us about the rattlesnakes and scorpions. We didn't see either one, luckily. A few cactus burrs did jump out and land, and they really jumped. I swear they did. They landed on Kara's.
True story.
They landed on Kara's pant leg, but Shura was prepared with a comb to remove them. You don't want to touch them with your bare hands. We mostly wore long pants, sturdy shoes, long sleeves, and sunscreen. I also had on one of my ubiquitous hats. You know, I wear hats. So some of the things we found in the desert. As we stood about 50 yards into the desert, Shura asked us to stop and see if we saw anything that looked like it didn't belong in that setting. Patrick was the first one to spot a backpack hanging from a prickly, sparsely leafed tree, and they're all like that in the desert. They're not tall, they don't. Sorry, desert is not my thing. Really, really not my thing. When we got to the backpack and looked around, we also found a few jeans jackets, one shoe, and some empty water bottles. From the sun fading on the jacket, Shura said it had probably been left less than a week ago. We wondered about the one shoe. Also pondered why these things had been left behind with civilization in sight. Perhaps because they might mark the wearers as immigrants. Perhaps because they changed out of their travel clothes and into good clothes before they left the desert. How hard is a desert walk? Although we found discarded clothing, Shura has found people, some alive, some not. It's not possible to carry enough water to ensure safety for the entire trip. Sometimes the travelers find cattle troughs, and in their desperation, they drink from them. That doesn't end well. Sometimes they find water tanks set up to help them on their journey. Sometimes they find that hostile Americans have shot holes in the water tanks to drain them of the precious water. After our walk in the desert, about as far as it is from here to Johnny B's Diner. It was so close, that was just unbelievable. We returned to Shura's home, where she had set her dining room table with a montage of items she had found in the desert. This was really hard to view, and it made me feel like a voyeur peeping into someone's private life. There were water bottles made from plastic gallon jugs and covered with burlap or fabric to hide the shine from the drones in the sky and to keep the water cooler. Shoes, both new and old. Beautifully embroidered tortilla cloths. We would think they looked like a small tablecloth. Family heirlooms to treasure. Photos, letters, medical supplies, a purse stuffed with new high-heeled sandals and a new outfit. Some things left behind on purpose because they were not needed in their new life. Other things left unwillingly because due to apprehension or death. Today, I return my traveling stone to the journey basket. Grateful for your blessings, thankful for a safe journey, and overwhelmed with the enormity of the issue and the innocent people caught in this struggle to live.
So we're going to light a few candles this morning, and the first one we light, and as we enter into a moment of reflection, we reflect on the people who even at this very moment are attempting to cross.
Sublime gracia del Señor, que un infeliz salvó. Fui ciego, mas hoy miro yo, perdido, y él me halló.
So as Marcy said, some of the people who cross don't make it. And Shura shared with us the moments that she has found remains in the desert.
In 2000
Sorry about that. And I want you to imagine for a second what it's like to be a family member of someone who you know is crossing, whether you're in the U.S. side or whether you're on the Mexico, Central America side. But you know you have a family. Maybe your 18-year-old son is attempting to cross. You know that. And you hear from him up until the moment, the day before, he actually is going to make his crossing. And then you hear nothing. You don't see him. He doesn't arrive at the checkpoint when he's supposed to. You have tried to reach him, maybe through his cell phone with no answer. And you simply do not know what's happened. I mean, think for a moment about what we do in this country when a child goes missing, or we have a missing person, right? We plaster posters all over the place. We put there a picture on the news. We spread it on Facebook. We have Amber Alerts. We have all sorts of tools to help us find that missing person. And if they're not found, we can only imagine the anguish of the family members wondering, what happened? What went wrong? Or did everything go right and they're simply in a different place? One of the problems that exists with people who are crossing and dying in the desert is that because they are not U.S. citizens, we can't file a missing persons report on them. We heard a lot about remains found in the desert. We heard a lot about missing persons reports that come from Mexico and Central America. And then we heard about a person who's bringing it all together. When I was back, when I was in Arizona in January, the church had a border fair, and we had some special guest speakers. And one of those speakers was Robin Renicky, who formed actually an organization to help match remains with missing person reports that come from either Central America or Mexico, and has formed this organization called Colibri. It's the Organization for Human Rights. So I'm going to show you a little video of her story and kind of what happens. It's very scientific. Those of you who are science buffs, imagine matching the DNA. There's a lot of forensic stuff that goes on with matching evidence and things that people may have in their pockets and clothing that they may find on them. So this gives you a little idea of what Robin and her organization do. You'll hear a little blurb in the video about a thank you for a grant that they got, so just disregard that. This is a thank you video, but it does give you insight into what happens with that.
In 2006, I went to the University of Arizona to work with Dr. Bruce Anderson, a forensic anthropologist. I didn't realize that coming to the US-Mexico border, I was coming to a disaster scene. More than 200 people were dying every single year in their attempt to cross the US-Mexico border into Arizona. Typically, there's medical examiners, forensic scientists, forensic pathologists, and anthropologists who examine the unidentified dead, and the police are those that investigate the missing. Because of the transnational nature of this crisis and the criminalization of migrants, the police are not really a viable option for centralizing the information regarding missing persons along the border. And that was the very beginning seed of the Colibri Center for Human Rights, which was basically filling a service gap and supporting the needs of family members of missing people last seen crossing the border, and connecting their information to the information produced by forensic scientists so that the families could have answers and so that the dead could be returned home for proper, dignified burial. My name is Robin Reinecke. I am co-founder and executive director of the Colibri Center for Human Rights. What Colibri has done is created a centralized database for all missing migrants last seen crossing the US-Mexico border. At this moment, it's actually hard to think of how Echoing Green doesn't help us. Echoing Green already feels like a family. It feels like an extended support network for what we're trying to do, not only at Colibri, but really on a personal level as well. I've lost someone myself, and as painful as that was, I'm fortunate to have had answers. But these families, they don't have answers about what happened to a missing person. And I know how hard it is for them to go on without knowing where their little girl is or their little boy.
So we light another candle and we reflect on those who lose their lives in the desert and the families who grieve them.
Sublime gracia del Señor, que un infeliz salvó. Fui ciego, mas hoy miro yo, perdido, y él me halló.
So not everybody who crosses in the desert loses their life. Some people make it. And then among those who make it are those who are detained, who are caught by the Border Patrol. And so Patrick's going to share our story of what happens to some of those people.
So I'm here to deport most of you this morning. And the thing that will prevent us from really replicating the federal court that we witnessed, first of all, is we don't have enough people in the room. We would have enough people in the room at the end of the court session. We have about 45 people here today. We sat in federal court where at the beginning there were about 110 people in the room. About 8 people were needed to administer the court itself. Another 15 or so were lawyers. 6 of us, 5 of us sat as witnesses. And there were 68 men and 8 women who in 42 minutes were deported. We have an idea that justice in the United States is an individual process, and I thought I would give you a little bit of an idea of what justice looks like for someone who's being deported. So I need a few volunteers. I need 3 people to volunteer to be federal marshals. So all you have to do is stand up and look stern. If anyone interferes with this if anyone interferes with this legal process, so I have 3. So I need other people for other roles. All right, so I have 3 federal marshals. I need 8 of you to be lawyers. All right, so could I get 8 of you? So the federal marshals sit down. Would 8 of you be lawyers? Lawyers, you're not going to be able to do much advice today. You've already had 15 minutes with each of your clients. But when I'm in the process of sentencing your clients, I would just like you to stand near your clients. So can I have some people? Nobody wants to be a lawyer. Okay. So stand up if you'd like to be a lawyer.
This is it, without going to law school. You
I don't like to be a lawyer.
You're interfering with the wheels of justice here. Come on. Our lawyers. You will have to move lawyers, okay? I mean, we've got 5. Come on, I have plenty of people to support. They need representation.
7, 8, 6.
We have 8, so count off. Count off by number.
1, 2, 3, 4,
5.
6, 7, 8.
All right, remember the number because that'll tell you who you're going to represent today, okay? Lawyers 1 and 2. I would like you to be busy while doing your work and make no contact whatsoever with your client. Lawyers 3 and 4, you're to be deeply caring, helpful in comfort. You know and care about these human beings who are being deported. Lawyers 5, 6, and 7, just show your frustration. You're trying to do a good job, but what can you do when you have a total of 20 minutes of time with your client? Okay? And then, if you would like to be deported, I actually have, and these are, by the way, these are the names of the cases from May 20th, the day that we were in federal court. I have plenty more people to deport, but if you would like to be deported, just take one of these and pass these on. Anyone be deported? No one?
Then lawyers.
Are you all lawyers? You just, if you're going to be deported, you just have to stand up when you're being sent. That's all you have to do. You have to follow instructions. Anyone? Okay.
I'll hand them out, that might be easier. I'm just gonna pick.
Yes.
I'm just gonna pick.
So let's make sure.
You will be deported. You don't get to choose to be deported.
I wish I had some sound effects. So, so would everybody rise? You have to start it.
All rise.
All rise. Now, what you don't hear is the clinking of chains. Because those of you who are being deported today, you're in handcuffs. Your handcuffs are attached to your belt chain, and your ankles are in ankle cuffs, and you have about an 18-inch chain connecting your ankles. All may be seated. Would all defendants please rise? All right? Now, you have all agreed willingly to plead guilty to one of 2 charges against you today. If you do not want to go forward with their guilty plea, you need to indicate so now to the federal marshals. Each of you have been charged with a misdemeanor of failure to cross during the normal operating hours of a legal port of entry, in charge of a felony of illegal entry into the country. The sentence for the felony is up to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. You have agreed to plead guilty to the misdemeanor today, to serve detention and be deported in condition that we waive the felony charge and fines. Okay, please be seated. Now, I don't have a helper here, but the judge didn't do this himself, but I'd like to please call the first 8 defendants. Number 1, and lawyers, please step up to your client. Francisco Javier Paz Rivas. Just stand where you are.
Come on over. Or you want to just stand? I'm
Yeah,
over
just-
there.
Yeah, just go, rather than having people move around. Number 2, Guadalupe Corrales. I thought I did the font large enough. Astanga. Number 3, Gustavo Orozco Perez. Number 4, Harold A. Demez. Number 5, Jaime Izquierdo Quintero Payan. Number 6, Jesus Alberto Martinez Camacho. Number 7, Jesus H. Morales Armenta. Number 8, Jose Antonio Mura Carranza. Francisco Javier Paz Rivas, do you plead guilty to illegal entry at a port near or about Nogales? Translator, do we have a earphone problem there?
Yeah, we have an earphone problem.
Say C. C. Okay, that's yes. Guadalupe, I sentence you to 30 days of detention and deportation. Guadalupe Corrales Astorga, do you plead guilty to illegal entry at or about the port of Nogales? She said C? Guadalupe, I sentence you to 60 days detention and deportation. Gustavo Orozco Perez, do you plead guilty to illegal entry at or about the port of Nogales? I sentence you to 180 days of detention and then deportation.
I object.
Marshall?
I will give, lawyer, I'll give you, your client has already agreed to this sentence. I will give you a chance to talk to me later. Jaime Izquierdo Quintero Payan. Jaime? Do you agree to plead guilty to illegal entry near or about the port of Nogales?
Yes.
Yes? I sentence you to 105 days of detention and deportation.
Objection. Can't be 106.
Jesus Alberto Martinez Camacho. Did you illegally enter the country at or about the port of Douglas?
I don't understand.
Translator? Is there a translator? This is in translation. Just say C. Okay. All right, that's a yes. I sentence you to 105 days of detention and deportation. Jesus H. Morales Armento. Did you illegally enter the country at or about the port of Nogales? I sentence you to 60 days of detention and deportation. Jose?
Wait, can we cut that back to 30 days, please? He really didn't hurt anybody, he just was in the wrong place.
He is accused of entering the country illegally for the second time, and he has agreed to the sentence, but I will make a note of your concern. Jose Antonio Mura Carranza. Did you illegally enter the country at or about the port of Douglas, Arizona? I sentence you to 30 days detention and deportation.
Your Honor, is there time for a brief question here?
Sure.
Is there any explanation given when they're sentencing these people for these variable sentences?
Not in court. The length of the sentence is determined on other crimes, which for the most part are previous attempts to enter the country. So the more attempts, the longer the sentence, and there are also some people who are charged with some additional.
Maybe
Other
they
things.
broke into a store.
The sentences
Yeah.
range from 30 to 185 days. For the direct infraction, the standard sentences are 30 to 180 days. So 8 of you, please remain standing. I now dismiss the felony charges and fines. You may be seated. Actually, at this point, the federal marshals will escort you from the room, and very soon we will be in here. So you may be seated. All right. Lawyers, you're not done yet. Number 1, Jose Barro Roman. Please stand. Number 2, Jose Javier Ledesma Romero. Please stand. Number 3, Jose Montiel. Please stand. Number 4, Juan Carlos Lozano Quinones. Please stand. Number 5, Julio Alberto Trejo Ruiz. Please stand. Number 6, Leopoldo Vero Landin. Please stand. Number 7, Luis Gustavo Ramirez Reyes. Please stand. Number 8, Marcelo Demetrio Reyes. Please stand. Jose Ibarra Roman, do you plead guilty to illegally entering the country at or about the port of Nogales?
Yes.
I sentence you to 30 days detention and deportation. Jose Javier Ledesma Romero, do you plead guilty to illegally entering the country at or about the port of Sonora?
Yes.
Yes. I sentence you to 60 days detention and deportation. Jose Montiel, do you plead, Jose Montiel?
Yes.
Okay. Jose Montiel, do you plead guilty to illegally entering the country at or about the port of Nogales, Mexico?
Yes.
I sentence you to 105 days detention and deportation.
It's a lot of days. I object again.
Come on. We have a legal process to get through here.
We got 42 minutes.
Right. Come on, I got a lot of people to court here today. Juan Carlos Lozano Quinones. Did you illegally enter the country at or about the port of Nogales?
Yes.
I sentence you to 30 days detention and deportation. Julio Alberto Trejo Ruiz. I know you don't care, but you and I share the last surname. This was actually
That
said.
literally was
Really?
Literally said by the judge. Did you illegally enter the country at or about the port of Douglas?
Mi hermano! No!
I sentence you to 60 days detention and deportation. Leopoldo Vero Ladin. Leopoldo? Did you illegally enter the country at or about the port of Nogales? I sentence you to 30 days detention and deportation. Luis Gustavo Ramirez Reyes. Did you illegally enter the country at or about the port of Douglas? I sentence you to 60 days detention and deportation. Marcelo Demetrio Reyes. Did you illegally enter the country at or about the port of Douglas, Arizona? I sentence you to 105 days detention and deportation. Defendants, I now waive your felony charges and fines. Please be seated. It took the judge just a little longer than it took me. There was an extra sentence for each person. So it took the judge a little bit longer to sentence individuals, or actually two questions that were asked. But what is true is felony charges and fines were waived in groups of 8. Now, imagine, so here's some things you have to imagine. Number one is that we watched 2 groups go through this. We watched 12 groups of human beings go through this process. They were called to come up to microphones. Lawyers sat behind them. The lawyers spent about as much time with them and had about as much contact as you saw today. And then what was on the other end of this, because what you didn't see, which we were able to see, is you saw the faces of men and women who had risked their lives, for most of them paid the equivalent of a year's wages to a coyote to have safe passage across the border, because it's not only the desert that kills, it is the cartels that kill. And there is an industry for leading people across the border. Many of the people who were detained were lucky. They were lucky because, it's not because their coyote was caught, they were lucky because they had a sprained ankle or they were slow and their coyote left them behind in the desert. And they're lucky because they didn't die in the desert. When you hear in a moment about the Commodore, you'll know the reality of what these men and women faced, because their future, as they walked off to their detention cell, some dejected with their heads down, others standing calm and proud, many looking just bewildered. They knew at the end of a detention sentence, that they were going to end up in their country of origin, or for many Guatemalans and Honduras, they would lie and say they were Mexicans because of how difficult it would be to attempt to come back again if they were sent to Honduras, Guatemala, Costa Rica. So they were going to end up shortly in Mexico with just their clothing, no money, no family. Their families do not live near the border, and they were going to have to collect themselves. And this actually plays into very clearly what the Commodore is. Thank you.
So once again, we pause and we remember those who are detained.
Sublime gracia del Señor, que un infeliz salvó. Fui ciego, mas hoy miro yo, perdido, y él me halló.
So I'm going to play the part of Kara today. I think most of you are aware that literally as we landed in Albany, Kara got out her phone and checked her messages, as all of us do, and discovered that her very best friend had died while we were in Arizona. So it has been an incredibly difficult week for Kara, so we gave her a pass on this one. She's home today, but she did write this, so these are Kara's words coming to you. And this is what happens to those who are detained for 30, 90, 105 days, however long, but then they are deported after their detention. And oftentimes dropped just on the other side of the border. Where we went is Nogales. There's a Nogales, Arizona, and there is a Nogales, Mexico. Literally, when they built the fence right down the middle of the town. It just is crazy. So there are buses running, private buses, this is all private jails, private buses, that go just about every hour and drop people as they're deported. Maybe the middle of the night, it may be in the afternoon, it may be in the morning, who knows, but they're dropped right on the other side of the border, and as Patrick said, with no other resources. And so El Comedor, which literally means the dining room, is about 100 yards into Mexico. It's run by the Jesuits, and it is basically a ministry that provides food and services to those who are dropped there to help them kind of get their lives back together and decide the next move. So this is what Kara writes. The first thing I noticed when I entered the small building were the posters displayed on the walls, each sharing an empowering message. I have the right to a life free of violence, and all people have the same rights. On one wall is a mural, a border-inspired version of the Last Supper, but with migrants as the apostles flanking Jesus, who sports a backward baseball cap. We served a meal and communicated as best we could with the migrants. They weren't just migrants, though. They were people, each with their own story. Some crossing the border, often their second, third, or fourth time, trying to reunite with family. Others, having been just deported, come trying to find shelter and a place to rest before figuring out their next step. All come humble and thankful for the good meal, clothes, and personal care items offered after their meal. So much love is shown here. It's not just the food for the stomach, but it is food for the soul. Because here they get respect. For most migrants, respect and dignity are not in their experience. But at El Comedor, the volunteers regularly and really want to lift up and hold and protect the dignity of each human person by doing things as simple as shaking their hand and smiling when they come in. The people who volunteer are really genuinely caring people. Announcements were made before the meal encouraging them not to travel alone, not to give their cell phone to anyone in fear of extortation. We heard stories of the coyotes taking cell phones of migrants and then calling their families demanding that they send money to their loved ones will be killed. We also heard stories about how just outside the Comedor, the cartel can be seen watching the building looking for young migrant men to kidnap. The cartel will spot the young men traveling alone and make friends with them and obtain information about their family and then turn on them and demand that they smuggle drugs or they will kill their entire family. The nuns that volunteer recognize the many dangers and fears these migrants face, and they entertain the migrants with clever little hand games to bring a smile to their face, momentarily releasing them from worries and fears. Before the food is consumed, a priest gives a blessing, and then we are all more grateful and able to finally eat. The migrants usually start lining up about 9 a.m., short on sleep, feeling deflated and uncertain where to turn next. Once the food is ready, they go in, and after a hearty meal and some good conversation, they go back outside and wait for the volunteers to quickly transform the soup kitchen into a small store. The volunteers lay out clothes that have been donated on the table, a table for men's clothes, a table for women and children's clothes, and an area with personal care items, including soap and razors and washcloths and a toothbrush, toothpaste, lotion. There were some odd donations as well, like hair finishing cream for blondes, and a very unique-looking hat that I think Marcy adopted as having been pushed aside by everyone else. But the men were grateful for what they were able to take. I could see in their eyes that the sizes weren't quite right, but they would make it work. When they got to the personal care items, they had a chance to pick out what they wanted and were so thankful, and oftentimes were hesitant to pick things up until you made eye contact with them and smiled and pushed the items towards them, encouraging them to take some. It was then that they nodded and repeated thanks as they filled their bags. I had a language barrier since I don't speak any Spanish, but I tried my best to communicate with sign language. As I passed out beans and coffee, I could make eye contact and smile, and I pointed to the coffee and the beans, indicating that I had more if they would like a refill. I think I may have accidentally accepted a marriage proposal. There was one man who, when I approached, had a huge smile on his face and kept repeating, mi amore, but not loudly or clearly, and I assumed he was saying something in Spanish that was the equivalent of more beans. So I nodded yes, which caused him to smile even more as he reached out for me. So I scooped up some beans, and when I was about to pour them into his bowl, he jumped back, shaking his head no. I was confused, and I backed away and moved to the next table. Later to find out he did not in fact want more beans, and mi amore means my love. Unfortunately, not all encounters were that lighthearted. I also served a table with a woman who didn't want to eat much. And one lady in particular I wish I would have communicated with. I could only read her eyes, which looked sad and fearful and defeated. She walked with her head down and sat hunched over, and my heart sank when I tried to imagine what this woman might be going through. Marcy spoke with a gentleman using hand gestures and learned that he most likely had just been deported and gone through Operation Streamline because he motioned to his wrists and his ankles as if to show shackles. Another man named Mark had been recently deported after living in the United States for 20 years. He left behind a 20-year-old daughter who was taking care of his 8 and 10-year-old children. The deportation process began when his neighbor reported that his dog was a nuisance. And in the process of investigating, the police discovered that he was undocumented. I left the Commodore feeling saddened by the journey that these men and women have faced and the journey they have yet to face. I wish I knew the answer to stop the thousands of migrants killed each year trying to cross the desert and avoid numerous migrants being deported and ripped from their families and their lives. But I realized coming away from this experience that it's okay to not know the answer, and that by just having this experience and sharing it, I can help raise awareness of the issue, and I have made a positive change for the better. Even the longest of journeys begins with a single step. And then Kara wrote this poem, and I share it with you. Men, women, and young children in tow desperately set out on a journey, knowing the dangers if they go. Some deported back and unsure of what's to come. Tired, defeated, hungry, they enter one by one. Still holding on but a strand of human dignity, they are welcomed by this loving community. They enter the room greeted by smiling faces, ready to do more than just a good deed. People here await to get whatever you may need. Volunteers that truly care listen to stories that you have to share. And when it's time for the migrants to deport, hopefully they can stand taller and hold this experience forever in their hearts. And so we light the final candle for those who have been deported.
Sublime gracia del Señor, que un infeliz salvó. Fui ciego, mas hoy miro yo, perdido, y él me halló.
As we kind of wind down our storytelling, I just wanted to invite you to reflect on a few scriptures. And these are from different faith traditions, and I'm going to ask you to read them together with me. The first is from the Torah, what we know as the Old Testament or the First Covenant, from the book of Leviticus. Please read with me. The strangers who sojourn with you shall be to you as the natives among you, and you shall love them as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. The second reading is from the Quran, and I again ask you to read with me. Serve God and do good to orphans, those in need, neighbors who are near, neighbors who are strangers, the compassion by your side, the wayfarer that you meet, and those who have nothing. And then I invite you to read our final reading from the Hindu scripture. The guest is a representative of God. And then to listen to these words from Jesus himself. Now when the human one comes in his majesty and all his angels are with him, he will sit on his majestic throne, and all the nations will be gathered in front of him. He will separate them from each other just as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats, and he will put the sheep on his right, but the goats he'll put on his left. And the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who will receive good things from my Father, inherit the kingdom that was prepared for you before the world began. I was hungry, and you gave me food to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothes to wear. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then those who are righteous will reply to him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry, or feed you, or thirsty, and give you a drink? When did we see you as a stranger and welcome you, or naked and give you clothes to wear? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And then the king will reply to them, "I assure you that what you have done for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you have done it for me." All the scriptures unite in one common truth. Offering hospitality for us is not just a casual suggestion, it really is a God thing. So I'm going to close this part down with a prayer, and I invite you to join me in a spirit of prayer. Creator God, open our eyes so we can see you in the eyes of our immigrant brothers and sisters. Eyes downcast for having lived so long in the shadows. Eyes challenging us to join them in the streets or picket lines. Eyes lifted looking for the Christ light in us. Compassionate God, who has come to dwell among us, open our ears to hear the cries of your children. Children being separated from their parents, rounded up in raids, led to detention centers, silently giving up dreams. God of justice, who crosses all boundaries, give us courage to resist, to say no to unfair labor practices and to unjust laws. Give us the strength to stand with and for your inclusive love, faith to believe another world is necessary and another world is possible. Let it begin with us. We're going to receive our offering as a way that we respond to God's goodness to each of us. If you're worshiping with us for the first time, please understand this is really for those who have made a commitment to our ministry, and we want you to be our guest today. So as our offering song, there is a song entitled Who's the Criminal? And I heard this first when I was down in Arizona in January. This is one of the musicians who performed at the Damhof Fair. As is the case often in Arizona, almost everybody's a senior citizen and they're rocking it. So even if you think like, oh my gosh, I'm a senior citizen, what can I do? This is what they do. And so he is going to sing the song. He'll pick up on the chorus. It's like one of those hand clapping cool things. So I'm going to pass around the baskets and you can sing if you want, especially on the chorus.
If you have to leave your land and you meet your match on the burning sand, and someone lends a helping hand, who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? Border man can't let you through. What's a poor man gonna do? Businessman's got work for you. Who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? Framing laws and aiming guns keeps you down and on the run. How will you feed your little ones? Who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? When your skin is red or brown or black and blue on white man's ground, when your head is pierced with a thorny crown, who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? Now I know how fear can leave you blind to the hopeful heart and the open mind, but to make a crime out of being kind, who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? I can shut my eyes and I can turn away and I can shut my mouth, nothing to say. Should someone die in my desert today, who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? Tell me who, tell me who. Who's the criminal here? Dime quién es el criminal. Dime quién.
and teach us to respond in a just and compassionate manner to the needs of our brothers and sisters on the journey. Amen. Since we're going a little bit late, what I'm going to invite you, whoa, look at the ring. What I'm going to invite you to do is if you have a prayer concern that you would normally come up and light a candle for, just write that on a piece of paper and put it here, and I'll post them on Facebook, or I'll send them out as an e-prayer request, and then we'll be in prayer for all of the people who have needs for us today. And then I want to just share a few announcements that are happening this week. First of all, today, for those of you who are big fans of the Jell-O, and if you're a landliner, you are welcome to go over to Beth and Elaine's house for a Jell-O lunch.
There's always room for Jell-O.
There's always room for Jell-O.
We've got bacon.
Seriously, is there bacon with Jell-O? Oh. I was going to change my mind.
Did you make a Jell-O bacon?
Okay, that's it. Almost got it. Moving along then. We want to remind you that Memorial Monday is in June. Here's what's happening. We are not getting arrested tomorrow. But I will get arrested on June 15. Abby and I will both be arrested. And we are looking for people to get arrested with us. They've changed it to 3 o'clock, so, you know, that's a little difference. And then also on June 8th, there's another rally, but you don't get arrested. And you can come on June 15 and not get arrested too. Like you'll get channeled this way, they'll ask you, who wants to get arrested? And you'll go this way and the other people go that way. So if you just want to come and rally and take pictures of Abby and I getting arrested, you can do that. But let me know, because we are trying to get a list of people. Once again, you'll be home in time for dinner. I have book group that night, so I'm planning on being home for book group, so it's not a big deal. Joe, raise your hand, Joe. Joe also works for the Labor Religion Coalition, so you can ask him about getting arrested too if you have questions about that. Garden Tour is June 10. We advise you to get your tickets ahead of time if you want, or wait for that day, and then we'll be doing our annual, like, down to Yanni's after we see the pretty flowers. The Pride Parade is coming up, so sign up. We need people to march in the parade, and we need people to do the festival afterwards. So, you know, we got the big old rainbow banner. We got beads. The beads are at my house. Sign up. There's a sign-up sheet there. Family Promise is coming, so if you haven't already signed up, we particularly are in need of men for overnights. Go figure. The women are stepping right up and saying, yeah, I'll spend an overnight. So now we need the men to follow suit. And there is book group for women on June 15. Ordinary Grace is the book. And then you can also sign up back there for if you want to be a greeter, worship assistant, all of that good stuff during the summer. And one final thing that didn't make the announcement, Luke, but on your table, there are little tiny pieces of paper. As you know, we do worship planning this week on Wednesday, and our worship planning team would like to know what movies you want to do as part of our Journey at the Movies series in July and August. So this is your chance to vote. Just come and put them up here in the big basket if you care, if you have an opinion. You can also add your own, because there may be movies that I don't know about that you would like to have me preach about. There are criteria. There has to be some point to the movie. So that rules out a certain number of movies. And there has to be at least the occasion to get a 60-second clip out of the movie without a curse in it. Which, what's the movie we went to that we're like, yeah, this isn't going to work? I had it on the list, and Kurt and I went to preview it, and we're like, yeah, not good. Bridesmaids. Yeah, we were like, yeah, not going to work. So those are we have small criteria. The bar is pretty low, but we do have a bar. Okay, so if you would stand for our benediction, our blessing, and our sending. Your part will appear in yellow. There we go. The caring and just one has prepared us to be living sanctuaries for love and justice. May we cross all the boundaries that separate us from our own true self and from others. May we know the joy and suffering of interconnectedness. May we have the wisdom and courage to say no to unjust laws that deprive people of their dignity and their rights. And may our solidarity with immigrants be a transforming power in the world. May we work together to restore and rebuild our beloved communities. Go forth in peace to serve the Lord. Amen.